was watching a documentary about China's current despotic system and why it is actually atrophying despite what they're saying. And the problem is that their system, to co-opt the political leadership, they have to dissuade good people from going in because it's a shakedown operation. It's a self-enrichment operation. It's not a national improvement operation. But it's that in reality, in the alternative reality, they are the national improvement outfit. In fact, they're the only outfit because competition is bad, because they decided a monopoly is the most efficient of all systems, in parentheses, for maintaining power and the self-enrichment program. Right? So what they're doing, because these are people and families, we're talking about family dynasties and friends, the yes people. We can go back into the Chinese dynasties. Then you're talking about dynastic conditions. And then what happened? Like, China is just fascinating history of this. They had a whole cast of eunuchs. Like, think of that. Like, the eunuch conspiracy. This is the layers of intrigue that they had were famous. But one thing that wasn't really happening was national advancement after a certain point, because these people got all caught up in the cobwebs of worldly existence. Just imagine cobwebs, just walking through cobwebs all the time. So at some point, you can imagine that the garrison commander who was supposed to be remortising the Great Wall of China, that money, actually, the emperor never showed up to check if he did that or not. So he was spending that on dancing girls and maybe a little bit of opium here and there, little side type of privilege he had thanks to the emperor. So that's just happening now in the modern context across all fields. And so they like a dumb emperor that writes checks and gives them impunity to do whatever they want, including taking over other countries and throwing millions, potentially, men away, because what are those men? Those are people who ask questions and, like, why aren't we doing things the right way at the top? Oh, that's a dissident. They have a whole category of people that somebody says that even in their private conversations, because they bug your devices now. That word comes up. Whoop, there's a dissident. Somebody's against us. Somebody figured it out. That person is a double negative. Let's make sure he doesn't get a job in the administration. So this thing, though, everybody laughs at the Chinese, like what dopes, and yet the same damn system, a lot of it, that model is for export. Every damn South American country could probably put in that basket. Argentina, people are like, oh, you're lying. Oh, check out Argentina, dope. What do you know about that? Yep, there you go, big zero. Yeah, you got all the answers. I'm a liar, right? Sure I am. Getting paid to lie. Oh wait, where's that check from Xi Jinping. Must got lost in the mail. But there are people cashing checks. It's just not you, probably, either. So congratulations, you're an enemy of the state according to their Mandarin-esque ideological explanations. They'd give you a death sentence tomorrow if they could. And they'd love to do it too. Because they're expanding the franchise. See, part of their franchise is expanding because it gives them a reason to throw people away that ask too many questions or have too many expectations about life. And you know, fatherless homes, like if we just put that in the context of slavery, when wasn't that the case? When Mongolian hordes overran Europe. Well, where were the men then 3 months later? Well, they were all gone. You had women and children. So do this, do that. They were the taskmasters. Get rid of the men, they're the taskmasters. So that's their sociology. They just do it in different ways. Train women to be aggressive and unreasonable, as if that's a difficult thing to do. And the problem takes care of itself in many cases. And then it wasn't the state's fault, it was the lady that has a whole list of reasons. She could write a book, all the bad things you did. And it was just some Mandarin that wrote the final judgment, and now you're a slave. So that's a way they do it. And yet, can you imagine? Not everyone appreciated that journey they were on. Just imagine the level of animal that would then attack a person like that. And yet, that also happened. Now, as far as causality goes, that is something that the superstitious people of those places, because in lack of real understanding of things, that can save your butt. Like, don't do that because it brings bad luck type thing. They did it anyway. And so there's different stories, like what happens to people like that. But dumb people do all different types of bad things that they're not really aware of the causality of it, because they're not really into understanding how the universe works. They don't have enough time to figure that out. So in this realm of causality, there's people making decisions like that too. But not all of them. They're sort of exceptional, like they went down in history. They got into the storybooks as like examples of what not to do. Now, this is not to say that I am suggesting that we one-to-one translate what the Buddha did in his time, under his conditions, in our worlds, but you can recognize some principles there that are not just practical, but also very enlightening. The other observation is that that is not the path for everyone. It is not a recommended path to paduginistic people, but it is an option. And it is a skill, because there is one fact or a couple of facts that even the most worldly person cannot dispute, is that old age, sickness, and death are inevitable in this realm. So when I look at these so-called modern governments, and I look at the people at the top that are more or less operating in a way that does not fulfill their mandate towards their peoples, their constituencies, their populations. In fact, they're the hostage takers of them, and that there can be disputes between two slave driving operations. The one slave drivers want to take the slaves away from the other slave drivers. It's really hard to find a pony in that race, although you can see a lot of tragedy in it. Back to the point. The point is that they have atrophying systems based on the architecture of their system, which is a misrepresentation of their system, because it would otherwise appear to be illegitimate, which is something they've decided to compensate for in an organized way using propaganda to present it in a different light. So they're in a dilemma. It's a race to the bottom, because this is also global. Like, they have some ideological descriptions for what they are now, certain optics and symbols. But then there's the other side, the international side that has dispensed with those old ways and are trying to constantly present themselves as the new way, the slick way, the utopian way. But more or less the results are the same. There's just atrophying and a lack of civic participation, because it's inbuilt into the system itself. So it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma for bad people. Like, oh, wait a second, we budgeted $10 billion. Why aren't people coming and designing new things for us? They're perplexed. It's like a hog that pulls its head out of the trough. It's munching on grain the whole day. And then throw some grain to the little piglets over there. Let them come in. They wonder why, like, only maybe 10% come to eat their grain. Why is this happening? I don't understand it. What's wrong? It's just, there's so many films or books or stories that could just work on that theme, making it more and more ludicrous till people just start losing their minds, because it's so uncanny, the stupidity of these damn slave drivers. All the advantages they think they have, because there's people all around the world that we're all friends with. Sure they are. Greedy, zero moral slave drivers, they get along real well. Sure they do. That's got to be the stupidest assumption that they have or pretend to have. Another great example to look at is Albania, especially in modern times. Albania was a psycho state for decades after World War II. It's all been airbrushed and brushed under the rug. There's very little understanding about how bad they were to their own people, and all of that, and it hasn't gone away. But apparently they've made some great international connections, and are very well liked in certain circles. But that just shows that these certain circles are completely misguided. But one of the things the Albanians didn't like you could get a death sentence for it. There was one guy, they found a fishing hook. They arrested him. He was fishing. And they went through all of his stuff. They could have planted it themselves, but maybe not. Somehow he got, they found a fishing hook that was manufactured outside of their socialist paradise. And the judge, this is funny because they were like technically advanced at that time, so they had a tape recording of the judgment. Some lady, some operatic, some connected person, she read off the death sentence. This was in a documentary, and the son, years later, decades later, because the regime collapsed, they've now reinvented themselves. They're capitalists now. Was able to get the tape recording of his own father's death sentence for a fishing hook. So let's just think of them, or let's think of the standard bad operating behavior of political operatives is a self-enrichment racket. And if they're self-enriching themselves, but they're also representing other parties that are self-enriching themselves, or at least not shaking the boat in any way, because they got lucrative contracts where apparently representative of the people are there to make sure that there's a good return on all those tax dollars, but they're not really working. They're not really regulating the regulations for the people, which is an abstract concept, but rather for whoever are the people that are getting the contracts, which is, of course, a very few number of people, because they don't have the connections that these people do. That's it. That's the talent that they have. That's what makes them so infinitely important and special and intelligent and too big to fail and all of that. So now, who did they hate? Well, they hated nationalists. What are nationalist people? Nation, native people of the country, for the country. Those are people, they have to poison frame them. They have to undermine them. They have to attack them. They have to suppress them. They have to do whatever they can to make sure that they don't start running the country for the people the right way, because that would be the end of their business model. So that's essentially what you're looking at in modern times. Now, some of them have more judicial impunity, such as the Albanians after World War II, and some of them have less. There's a gray scale of that. And some countries are more corrupt than others. For example, obviously Finland at this time is less corrupt than the UK. And how do we know that? Well, the results are manifest that make that conclusion the plausible one. So do believe your eyes, right? Your eyes that show the garbage going in, and your eyes that are seeing the garbage going out. Believe your eyes, yeah, believe it. That is a garbage system. You got garbage operators in the system. And that's it. Who are the bad guys in their garbage operated systems? They're the nationalists. The nationalists, the ultimate evil of self-enrichment schemes. If they come in, we lose everything. That's what the conversations, the hysterical conversations they have behind closed doors. So if they can get rid of them, get rid of them. Slam. That's it. What that means for the country? Because here's the other thing: the people they just throw away, they don't always come back. It could. How many Leibnizes has Germany had? See, there's a question. Leibniz. Everyone's like, what? Leibniz? Who? What? Who? So right when I just said that name, I'm going to guess 5% of the audience knows what I'm talking about. Now they've heard the name. They don't know anything beyond that. Well, the answer to that question is Germany has had one Leibniz. Now imagine if at that time there was just a bunch of complete vulgarians, complete impunistic bullies, complete dunderheads running Germany at that time. And because Leibniz threatened them in some way, that they decided to put a poisonous frame on him and say, this guy, he's evil. This guy's involved in magic. This guy is, you name it. Throw him in prison. He's dangerous. Where would Germany and the world be today without Leibniz? Now, other people say, okay, well, Newton, So some commenter wrote back recently, like, man, you're brilliant, but you're losing me because you're getting way too complicated. You're going off on tangents. Like, I understand that genius and insanity are sort of the same thing, but for God's sake, please just break it down and tell us what's happening in a simple way that we can understand. So I said, all right, this one time I'll make this one exception. And I do regret the day I even got involved with politics. Like, I regret it every damn time. But I just keep coming back because I do want everyone that I care about to do better for themselves and for others. And I have had a great time with a lot of great people, so I'll ratchet it down a notch. So just let's say it's football. You've got a team, you've got a coach, you've got assistant coaches. You want to get out on that field and you want to win the game. And the game is not trivial. This is an important game. What does the other side want to do? Well, they want to do the same thing, but how are they going to do it? Well, imagine if a team decides to mess up your coach and your assistant coaches. You might want to mess up your donors, mess up the faculty's management, so that the field you practice on is messed up, like some type of astroturf. Where'd they start that off at? Was it the Houston Astros, AstroTurf? And now that concept has taken on a whole different meaning, but why did people not like AstroTurf? Now, the weird thing about the one meaning of it is that you just roll it out like a carpet. You don't need to use any maintenance. Think of the sales guys who sold AstroTurf to the Houston Astros. So here you go, you just pour a slab of concrete and roll this stuff out real quick. Got low installation costs, and then voila, you've got a perfect arena for highly skilled athletes to destroy their ligaments on, to break their bones on. But that's all down the line. The sales pitch, if you're looking at it in an economic standpoint, seems to be right. I know athletes that will not play on AstroTurf. They refuse. Or at least they refused when it was a new thing that people were trying to sell them on. Do you think they made the right decision for themselves or the wrong decisions for themselves? Now, did the management make the right decision for themselves or the wrong decisions for themselves? Well, there you see, there's various viewpoints. Okay, but I'm getting too complicated again. See, I'm getting into words. AstroTurf also took on a whole different other meaning. The other guy was like, what are you talking about, AstroTurf is has other meanings of it, such as spreading bad ideas, bad ideology. What do you think all that political propaganda was? Just don't get fixed up on any one of them. Look at like 10 different kinds. This guy is the supreme leader. He is infallible. There is no other choice. This is the Monopoly franchise. Get on board or get crushed. You know, and some of it, I mean, it's absurd if you think about it, but these are just, you could look back at it as historical causalities. This is what was on offer in their supermarket. One big can of Spam. Not even Spam. You know, Spam is good. I like Spam. If you're out there in the bush, you got yourself a couple cans of Spam, you're doing very well for yourself. There's all different ways you can prepare it. You can also just eat it raw, straight out of the can. And if you're freezing to death because it's snowing and you're in a hole in the ground, it really is like Thanksgiving. So, but okay, so how does the other team that's breaking the rules gonna work against you? Well, look, they're just gonna do a 360 all around your operation and try to get people in it that stink, that are bad at what they do, that don't do what they say, that don't have new ideas other than riding out their tenure, taking every advantage of everything that they can do to mess it up ultimately, because they don't care. It's a short-term proposition. They're more or less inside. They're amazed that your organization could be that stupid to let incompetent people like themselves, like in many cases blatantly and aggressively incompetent people into your organization, and then to have the temerity to think you're going to win long term with those bad odds. So for athletes out there, I hope that helps you understand the situation we're in, because our coaches and assistant coaches, they're our political leadership. So turning our politics into a circus is a precondition for losing conflicts. So that's why they did it. That's why it's being done. And it's a breakdown of just straight up down people who have sold out and have not been busted, and people that were just put there to be idiots. Well, what is war? War is hellish conditions. Well, hellish conditions can be temporary. So you walk outside, the sun is burning you up to a crisp, it's 130 degrees, it's hellish conditions. Well, at 3 a.m. that evening in the desert, it's not that hellish. So life has variability. And things that are bad can get better. And if they don't get better, they can at least return to neutrality. So if you're working yourself up about bad things, what's skillful about that? How it's really like, you want to punch yourself in the face, do that too. You can do it. Take your fist right now and punch yourself in the face. Now you think, well, that's stupid. Well, there's people that are essentially doing that all day long, just in a different way. So refrain from doing that. And hellish conditions, again, this is part of this realm that we live in. This is part of the filtering and refinement process. That's the way you can see it. Now, some of my descriptions have used the word, or perhaps even overused the word nihilist, but I use that because they're the sneakiest of the bunch, because they claim to believe in nothing, and actually they do believe in nothing, and so it really is hard to wrap your mind around nothing. But the more traditional vectors of bad actors believe in some form of God that is their own personal deity that allows them to be victorious over less moral people. And the fact that they're immoral could be that they were misguided by their own, or what they thought was their own people or their own guides. And so if they're able to derail them because they didn't have the morality not to be derailed, they feel like that it's justified to treat them as someone not believing in their one and only God. Now, you could say, well, this is only on the radical fringes of certain theological movements, but it's a gray area, isn't it? Grayscale. You might have people that don't believe that directly or would admit to believing that, but maybe inherently they snigger when they see your people. It's sort of a parable for them, and also their spiritual counselors let them know that they're superior, not just morally, but as a community of believers in their version of events. And, there's a clause, anyone that doesn't believe in this franchise is fair game. Just basically some type of animal on two legs that they can do absolutely anything to, and their God doesn't have any downsides for them, because their God told them directly, and they pull out this, that, and the other thing that's written down black and white that can be seen this way or that way. And they've decided to interpret it in the radicalized way because it empowers them to just stratospheric levels of exterminationist impunity. So do look for signs. Look for signs of that. Don't forget that part. That part is definitely a big part of it. And there's a whole lot of religions out there and a whole lot of spectrums of religion out there. And to overlook extremist groups like that is a fatal oversight. Or at least can be if you're in any type of proximity to them or have any connections that can be damaged by them. Or you think you downplay the danger or overestimate your abilities to not succumb to any of the manifold different tricks they got for messing up your type of people. So the people that downplay that for the sake of keeping everybody calm, they might not be the best givers of advice. But do realize we live in a big world. So if this is a Pacific Islander living on a paradisical island in the Pacific, this doesn't apply to you. You don't have this problem. Lucky you. Although I have heard rumors the Philippines has problems like this. I have heard rumors that Southeast Asia has problems like this. I've heard rumors that Asia has problems like this. And now we have Europe and the Western world that has problems like this. So figuring out who's who and who's doing what, well, all that works as long as there's not major catastrophes or major aggressive criminal assaults and developments happening. It becomes less and less plausible. But that's only if you know the information. If they shut down the information, or they emphasize, for example, a volleyball game instead of certain riots going on for reasons that they're misinterpreting deliberately for different reasons that they know about, but maybe you don't know about. But why would they do that? If they're like you, but if they're not like you, but they're just trying to be like you type thing. That's the sort of paradigm that sort of develops in situations like that. But then there's also the skeptical faction. It's like, there's no way the biggest losers of society could end up doing this. Well, they could if they had major military backers of some of the biggest militaries on Earth. It sort of gives you a bunch of different options, doesn't it? That the common, let's say, hero doesn't have because his country isn't fighting the war that doesn't think is even happening. Because how do you define that? What are the objectives of war and how are they achieved? And well, if you can achieve them without firing a shot, I guess that wasn't a war, that was a evolution of humanity into their franchise. That should also give these useful idiots pause. Don't think for a second once they get the upper hand you're going to be sticking around in any way whatsoever. They go through their ranks too. You use one wrong word, you're gone. One wrong look. And it will happen to a lot of them, so you can at least know that. The problem is with most people is that they don't have a lot of time to figure out things or solve problems, especially how there's national problems. There's people, they're looking to pay the rent, okay? And it's understandable because rents have gone up like 10 times over the last 30 years. And then they got to find a job or do what the job says. There's not very many jobs out there in a shrinking economy due to mismanagement on a strategic level. So when normal people start having to try to figure out strategic problems, well, the first thing they run into are the damn so-called politicians that have turned it into a racket. So how they got presented, how they got put in the pipeline, how they were educated, where they come from. You see, again, people think that the problem of vetting candidates is a problem some other people have that would take that very seriously. But when the candidates are as bad as they are now, that process ipso facto is not working. You can only get garbage out if you put garbage in. But then you're talking about like a level of problem that the normal person does not feel like they know how to solve. So they disengage. But really when that happens and it's a public institution, and if it's your taxes that they're mismanaging, and even if you don't have a lot, just think of all of your uncles, all of your fathers, all of your grandfathers, all of your grandmothers, all of your aunts, all of your cousins, everybody that is paying tax, these people are putting it anywhere but where it needs to go. Now, there has been this little thing that people have been talking about, the war in Ukraine. People are dying like by the thousands every day. So now who's involved in that again? Well, it's the Russians who are being supplied by the Chinese. So there we just got two actors, and we can add North Korea and Iran to that number because they have sort of an alliance. Then you got Brazil, India, Pakistan, and a bunch of other semi-rogue actors, which make up a multipolarity. So, and then you have to investigate into neo-Leninist operations, which is first off a borderless concept. They're an international franchise, which means they're into world takeover, domination. And they're also into political intrigue. So coming back to the Cold War for a second, the Cold War was there for a reason, and there was trade barriers, there was travel restrictions, and there was a lot of scrutiny of the people that were claiming to be something that they couldn't have been coming from an authoritarian regime. But because history stopped, right, because of the end of history, thanks to sociological terrorists, of which their systems are engineered and comprised of, so they have a whole departments working domestically and also regarding foreign matters, that they would love to get their mitts on any type of Western countries weak enough to allow them access. So when the Cold War apparently supposedly ended, which was a ruse, Western governments allowed them to infiltrate. We're talking financial interest, gigantic financial interest, as much influence as money can buy type of interest. And guess what countries they targeted? They targeted strategically important countries that could possibly pose some type of counterbalance to them. In naval matters, international naval matters, 70% or something like that of the Earth's surface is the oceans. So if you had a country with a long naval tradition like the UK, Australia, and the United States, managing their governments effectively, the chances of them taking over that real estate, which is gigantic, would be impossible. So would that be in their interest or against their interest? Now, if they don't want to trigger off a nuclear war, what would be other cheaper, more maniacal, and more effective methods? Well, could you find proxies to represent your interests in government and team them up together so that basically instead of sitting down and deciding what's the best thing to do, they decide what's the worst thing to do that they can manage to get away with within the realm of plausible deniability? Do you think two wannabe superpowers that have no track record of good morals, do you think that would be something that is beneath them or something they would be actively engaged in? And then just think, okay, this didn't happen. This animosity didn't start with the war in Ukraine, which is an outbreak of open, violent, mass hostilities. That couldn't in some way be interconnected, like the supporters or the allies of such a country, that they wouldn't target them with military level tactics, strategies, methods, measures, people, posers, fakers, takers. Because there's one thing I know is just if a general isn't giving orders properly, there's no way in hell, even a smaller force, an army of 100 could beat an army of 10,000. Have you ever worked on a rusted bolt in an impatient way? Like you went in with the expectation that it was just like a standard bolt. Have you ever put like a rolled bolt on a screw that's fresh from the store or fresh out of the package, and it just glides on there? It's like that light machine oil, like we're talking well made machining, perhaps fine machining all the way down to horological devices, fine ones, but then you move somewhat up from that. We're talking about fine tooling machinery, and it just glides on because the parts are very finely machined. And that's your expectation in the instance that you encounter a rusted bolt and you think it's just going to slide off, and then you have a wrench that isn't quite the right wrench because of reasons like your perfect wrenches were perhaps stolen the day before, which was sort of pre-charging you to be in somewhat of a charged mood. Someone could say explosive mood, because they were really difficult to get and perhaps even historical. And you paid an exceptional amount of money for them, like something you couldn't have afforded as a college kid and didn't. But after working for decades, you decided to buy the best that really isn't considered the best by many people, but have a certain genuine, authentic value that is, for some people, considered to be the best, which is why they chose those tools. And here you are the next day at your humdrum job, doing a humdrum thing. Or how about this? You're just doing a humdrum thing because you don't have a job. But that's coming later. Let's say you're back when you do have a job. And it just slides. And it sort of flakes. It makes sort of a cracking sound. And it's corroded. It's frozen. It's chemically fused to the bolt. And it came at an unexpected time. You have this and this and this thing to do that day, and you sort of planned it to be an easy job, and it turns out to be a complicated job, because getting a bolt that is fused off something is not so easy. You have to take but it is possible. If you weren't charged with fury, but rather had just a cool bottle of the most pure spring water, just filled with refreshment. Have you ever been on a great vacation, but it didn't start off great, but it took you a couple of days, and then you just have one great day, one great weather, one great experience, one great just wandering through scrub trails in the noonday sun type of experience, and it made it all worth it? Well, that's what you can have Instead, imagine you come from that state of mind to the bolt. You can laugh, can't you? You can see this, like, look at this humdrumness right here. It's Monday morning again. It's Monday morning. Abstracted to something that is, or can be, frictional, abrasive, aggravating, disappointing, maddening. We have all of these words, don't we? They do describe real states of mind, real ways of living. I am positive, 100% certain that some people go through life like that rusted bowl. And they don't have the tools and they don't have the right attitude to approach the problem with the patience that it deserves and requires. You're not going to get the bolt off if you don't take the right steps. And if you don't know how to get off the bolt, then the right step is to get past ignorance and into the speciality of the task at hand, however mundane, worldly, normal. Imagine you're freaking out and some old plumber shows up. It's like, what are you freaking out about? There's this rusted bolt and I had planned 10 minutes to be and this and this and this. How do you think he's going to look at you? With all he's seen and been through. It's more than rusty bolts out there. There's complex, sometimes social games, sometimes mental games in play that can throw you for a loop. It's normal. But you can also fall out of a loop. You can fall out of a samsara, is what they call it, like a circular, repetitive, aggravating behavior. Yeah. Let's take the sting out of a lot of words. Look at things more neutral and abstract. Let's get back down to first principles. Politician, that's a very complicated sounding word. And it's used so often by so many people that describe certain people or the career path that certain people have taken, that it can really take on a negative value, which is to say it becomes a charged word. But that is misguided. That is some type of side effect when dealing with the type of countercultural trends that we have been subjected to in this time of adverse conditions. It's just, and it can happen to certain personality types. How many people are dealing with politics? Raise your hand. So I'm talking to the whole city right now. Raise your hand. Now see, I'm looking out in the crowd. I don't see nobody. Maybe two people, 100 miles away. But if we go and we return to first principles, politician, let's say, is that a good person that does good things for the most amount of people? Is that how we can redefine it? Is that how we can make some fast rules of definition, which is to say, if you're not that thing, you don't belong in politics? And that, again, changes the cultural dynamic, the paradigm from cynicism to a new prototype that is based on straight, transparent, effective, and beneficial principles. So you want a crane to work, guess what you need? You need a crane operator, a trained professional that has ethical standards and a deep sense of responsibility and commitment to excellence at all times, under all conditions. Someone that also knows something about the maintenance, the proper maintenance, not just the operation of the vehicle. Can you imagine you show up the next day, you're the guy who made the whole crane happen, and he climbs down, real sloppy looking, and he failed to take care of a few things that need to be done, like depressurize the hydraulics. And he just left it on for like 72 hours, and this is his first 3 days on the job. Okay. That's a different situation, isn't it? He doesn't know better. He didn't take it seriously. Not all people are the same. Not all people are at the same level of professional knowledge. It might be a hasty situation. For example, the port blew up. The good guy is no longer there, so you just got to get this guy and tell him real quick, this is what you do. But it's not done with just one day. Somebody's got to coach someone, have compassion with someone, and not be living in a world where everything is perfect all the time, when that is impossible. When it is perfect, it's great, enjoy it. Everything's running perfectly, great, enjoy it. When it's not, don't be disappointed. Or if you are disappointed, because it's almost impossible not to be disappointed when you have a normalcy bias, which is how we are built. All you animal people out there that have so much compassion for animals, if you don't have that basic compassion for humanity, for the two-legged animals, not just for others but for yourself, then you're not a humanitarian, and you're also not skillful. This is the thing about people. People get on wrong paths. Sometimes they get on the right path. Sometimes it's by accident, and sometimes they get back on the wrong path. People out there, they don't know what they're doing. They're living day to day. And why shouldn't they, if they're just animals? Not bad animals in the bad sense, animals in the good sense. I'm a big friend of animals. Why? Because they can't really be conniving, can they? Even a tiger, where's the connivingness? If you've seen it in a cat play with a moth or hunt a ball of twine, then you can abstract that to the tiger as well. That's what he's doing. You're its mouse. Is there evil in that? Or is that just the way they're built? Is that just the way we're built? And then, would it be advisable to jump into a tiger's cage if you have compassion for the tiger and compassion to yourself? That would be unwise, wouldn't it? So, there's all these different things that are predeterminate, that are characteristic of the things themselves. It's more about the orchestra and the harmony that can ensue when an orchestra is running the way it should. That the orchestra is in excellent condition and all of the players are in excellent shape. And that it's a communal effort to create excellent music. And the excellent music is made manifest with the music. That principle, good words, we run right past it. Oh yeah, good words. Okay, what's next? Good thoughts. Oh, okay, yeah. Good thoughts. Okay, come on. Tick, tick, tick. Looking at the clock. What else? Good deeds. Okay, okay. What else? Just hurried up there, but that's it. Like, wait. I thought there was more. Well, yeah, there is more, but you have to go back to those three things. And then you have to look for some solutions. Now, in the case of words, think of yourself as a factory. Every word you produce, the word you think, you store in the warehouse. The word you say, you ship. So make sure the words are good that you store, and the words are good that you ship. And the rejects, throw on the reject pile, and you're going to burn those later because they're harmful to the customer base as well as the warehouse. Imagine it's something that you can't store. It's something that messes up the whole system. The symmetry of the system, it's like corrupted data. You don't need it on your hard drive. You want it reformatted. Because imagine if you're thinking you're deleting things, but they're still there and they're actually harmful for the operating system. That's the equivalent. So you need to make sure that the formatting process is thorough and reliable. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like you can hit the button and it'll sort of half format, but it's so rough in some way that the system got fried in a certain way that it's going to take some time. You're going to have to hit the button and perhaps do some type of inventive or creative ways, and maybe not just try to jam it the first time, but just get what you can in during each session, during each reboot, during each prayerful meditative session. And think of it this way, it's not that you fail if you don't get rid of it all in the first go. It's looking at the percentage, just like you gained 3% more space today type thing. So yesterday it was 7% and today it's 10%. Thanks to your good efforts that, although not perfect and did not achieve a perfect result, you've now got double digits when you just had single digits. And not just in the department of empty space, but in terms of equanimity, in terms of nothing. Coming back to the concept of hellish times, there is such a thing. There's the exteriors and there's the interior equivalents of that. So what I've been discussing is the interior equivalent, which I believe is to be the plane of existence that materialists are the least aware of, because they value it the least, but they should actually value it the most. Because how can you be doing something that is beneficial when you're neglecting first strategic principles? Well, the answer is You don't. You do something oftentimes detrimental to yourself and others. And you can also have detrimental cultures, a culture of abuse. You can have cultural sadism. You can have cultural animosities. And all of those things are pathogenous. You could see that in a socio-environmental realm. Your interior space, it's a microcosm. It's a biotope. It's either trash, somebody threw a radioactive drum of glowing goo in your lake, or you got in there and you fished it out and disposed of it into a space portal, and you cleaned up what you could clean up through that, also through the space portal, and then you cultivate what you have. What was barren and thorny just perhaps a day ago, an hour ago, a minute ago, is now smooth and cultivated. You've got a super-powered weed whacker, right? You can just click your fingers and whatever weeds were there, you can have them blasted away. And it's really non-violent. You didn't punch yourself in the face to do that. You just changed your mind, changed your perspective. You took the long view. The person screaming obscenities in your face, that's something they're generating. That's their factory. And they're shipping it, but you're not the receiver. See, they're getting a retour of that. So they think they're shipping it, but it's coming back. They thought they shipped it. It's going to come back beat up in a box. So it's going to be covered in, graffiti. It's going to be ripped duct tape. It's going to look like somebody kicked it down an entire flight of stairs a couple of times. Dents in it. Oh, it smells too. It looks like somebody, maybe a couple of winos, decided to relieve themselves because it was thrown in an alley somewhere, type thing. But as far as you're concerned, you've got nothing to do with that. You're just witnessing unskillfulness in someone else that is living in a different place mentally. But okay, physically, look at this. It's an apparition of materials. You've got some bones and some muscles and some squishy parts in between. Some fluids, some electrons, and some things like that. But it can even go further. I mean, if they want to make the realness of their unskillfulness even more real, then they'll try to perhaps damage your physical form. But at that moment, it's like, well, why should anyone allow something else to damage something that is better off left undamaged? How skillful would it be to just, oh, here I am, just beat me up. What? This is not to say you need to confront people. Of course, the wisest strategy is to go out of the paths of contention. And if you meet contention, to go out of its path again and again and again until there's no contention. But also not suffering undue damage. Sometimes we can't get through life without getting some type of damage. This is causality. physical causality. But you can reduce the damage. And so how you reduce the damage, leave it up to you. You can take the full-on reverse strategy, the spinning strategy, the cane strategy, the staff strategy, and all the way up from there. All the way up to space, the space strategy. Really just depends what you're dealing with, right? It's a level of scale. And then you abstract what is good people, right? Good people means also good self-preservation. Don't go on a hike without what you need. I'm going to be the first person that tells you that. But what do you need and what don't you need? Some people think they don't need things that they do. Some people think they need things that they don't. And so a politician should know what do most people need and what do most people don't need. Here's a quick bit of info. There was some news outfit under the BBC umbrella. They have 57 people earning over 10K a month to produce 5 hours of news footage a week. So now also realize that to get into a gig like that, it's about patronage. So it would be interesting to know where and who those 57 people are. But a lot of these companies, like news agencies like BBC, they have a royal mandate to collect fees. So they have like over a $3 billion a year budget. And they have to publish certain statistics, like demographics of their workforce, which is over 20,000 people. 10,000 of them aren't from the country. So just imagine that would have been 1.5 billion pounds that would have every year gone into supporting the people of the country and the humanities of the people of that country. That is not there. That's been substituted out, replaced with something else. Now you'd say, is it something better? No, it's something worse. It's something accusatory, something degrading. And then they also have the statistics of their viewership. Their viewership just keeps going down, like dropping off a cliff. But again, their budgets, their revenues actually go up because they really do try to get their revenues in every way possible. Again, it's a royal decree, so they figure out new ways to dun people. Of course, there's some revolt, like there's some way to stop paying, but you have to do it every year, otherwise it automatically defaults to their collection racket. So if you think that I'm making this up, go check for yourself. They have to provide this information to the public. Now, if we just say, or just assume for a second that we're all not taking crazy pills, who would be the people that would be interested in pulling off a heist like that? Or has a historical track record of being obsessed with news agencies and politics and terroristic social organizations and politics and all that. Could it be Marxist Leninist operatives? Could it be? Is there like a 95% probability that that's the case? Well, if that's the case, then what does that make them other than freeloaders? Freeloaders with an ideological component, wouldn't that be the case? Is that what we're looking at? So what would keep them from continuing their racket? Well, maybe it's the idea that they don't belong in the positions that they're in, entrenched in places they don't belong either, for reasons that delegitimize them on a fundamental level. Like the principle of meritocracy or fairness or uh, operating according to a mandate that is clear, which is to do the best that you can do under the circumstances of what you have. Somebody should go back into the royal charter that they've been given and see if the stipulations are being met in the spirit of the charter when it was first issued. And if it's not, what does that mean? Well, wouldn't that be a grounds for rescinding the charter? But okay, you get immediately $3 billion back into the budget, but will you allocate it for something that is for the culture, or are you just gonna send it to the banks and pay off some interest in an never-ending austerity program? Well, if bad leadership shows that they do like to switch to austerity, if nothing, if they can't pull off any blatant scams that have some type of benefit for them and theirs, they'll throw it to the austerity program until they can figure something else out. Or there's enough people that have so much economic misery and lost opportunity that they stop caring about focusing on politics because they need to meet existential needs on like if you take the self-actualization hierarchy, they make sure you get back down to the survival mode. And if you don't survive, that's also not really a problem for them. There's more where you came from, right? That's the way they see it. If there were 1 million people left in the UK, for example, they would still want to be at the top of that, so that they get more and you get less type thing. This is the premise, the modus operandi of the international. That's how they thought they were going to take over the world. Well, they're in the UK. They're embedded there. They haven't declared it a Marxist-Leninist paradise. That's the other thing. That whole utopianist language. They sort of jettisoned that a long time ago. They're sort of on board with capitalism now, but this is what it looks like. Sort of undeclared assault on the power. And before you naively think, oh, well, that's the BBC, everyone knows that place has been trashed for years, which right off the bat is unacceptable on every level. Why should anyone accept that? The BBC, before it got ramshackled in this way, was considered one of the benchmarks of excellence in the world. So just think of all the loss that their subversive actions have caused humanity as a whole. But don't limit it to BBC. It's basically every organization, big corporations, universities. I mentioned that before. People, oh yeah, no, you're just being bothered by things because the times have passed you by. What? Culture, there's good culture and the good way of presenting it, and there's the opposite of that, okay? And there's a gray area in between, but just ideological uh, parameters that are obvious and for all to see, that is an indication that they're there, that they've taken over in some way. If it might be some key departments, strategic departments like emissions, for example, bureaucracy, so you can see it there. That's the toxic blob. And again, big corporations, you would think this is a company that's known for making drills. Someplace from Milwaukee, they have a. Now, I'm just using this as an example, but I'm sure it's happened in Wisconsin with a bunch of different companies. But now they've taken a completely new direction and they're producing who knows what that makes no sense. With a lot of preachy people that have bad ideas, aggravating, divisive, inverted psychosociological principles. Isn't that surprising? So keep coming back to the conclusion. These are not creative people. They're copying and pasting ideological ways of operating, and they're applying it to different things. And they're just trying to get into everywhere they can get into and turn it into a patronage system. And that's why innovation tanks. That was another thing that came up. I was watching a documentary about the Soviet Union, and more or less that's what happened to all of their industries, is that they became dodo birds. They were producing vintage equipment in a vintage way because all of the positions in management were politicized. And politicizing and focusing on politics and office politics and who gets what and where. And believe it or not, if you're burning up all of your energy defending a position that you never should have gotten in the first place, that nothing really good happens for the way of operating. And then again, you have the ideological parameters that, oh, we're all equal. Of course we're all equal, so that's why you're working in the factory that doesn't work right. And I'm in management, and that's indisputable because we're in a socialist utopia. Oh, and if you criticize, if you're unwise enough to be a dissident, because we have a label for people like you, and you're then an enemy of the state, and we will snitch on you to a pseudo-legal body that will imprison, execute, or transport you to a working camp. So when we say it's Flag Day, make sure your flag is on the flagpole. And when we drive by in our limousines, make sure you salute. And when we start a war somewhere, make sure you got your boots on, because if you don't, you'll be going barefoot to the front. And if you try to retreat, we're going to be the ones that'll shoot you in the back. So it's obvious that information is something they don't like, unless it's information that they've specifically crafted to have some advantage for them, which is essentially what propaganda is. Like if you think of it in warlike terms, cultural warlike terms, everything we do is great. Everything we do is a victory. Everything they do is suspicious, maniacal, or wrong. So you can look at it, this is what bullies, if all the bullies of the world came together as like a bully conference and were like, look, this guy has this rhetoric, this one has that type of rhetoric, And this creates that. Oh, yeah, don't forget the psychologists and sociologists that do deserve to be in prison. But they're the ones telling the bullies who should be in prison so that they can rule more effectively by not being challenged, not by people and not by ideas. Because they prefer a personality cult type of system. And again, not just in the political side, but also in the scientific fields. You're a scientist that has the political affiliations. Well, all of a sudden, you're the Elon Musk of science. And if you question the Elon Musk of science, then you're wrong. And he'll tell you why, and then you'll be kicked out of whatever institute you were in. Because they don't want to hear that. They like that because it has that political dynamic, which is related to their own dynamic. So they like operatives like that. Because these are cynical people. And they're cynical people because they have the position of, although they're not qualified for it, but they do have it. So why shouldn't they? That's their first move. One of the previous episodes, I mentioned the heist. And it is very concise to see things in that lens, to use that as a simile for a political shakedown operation. Let's get into the heist type of mentality. If you're going to pull off a heist, you might have a team. Have you ever seen the movie Heat? See how those people operate. And then think, okay, you can rob a bank, but you can also rob a political system. Like if you rob the political system, you get to the tax revenues. And then think that maybe there's an organization of just like bank robbers. There's people that have specialized in that type of heist, and they're globally active. Like they might have pulled it off in one place, and now they're going to try to pull it off in other places and possibly maintain their position in those places as long as they can. You look to Argentina, there you can see it in one form. Like look to countries that are not doing well and then see if you can see similarities in their political operatives and also the astroturf they use. Because they're probably dealing with a team of psychosociological experts, pollsters, lobbyists. Like they have, just think of a team. Just like in Heat, you got safecrackers, you got electricians, you got the shooters. So there's a hierarchy of experts working together to pull off the heist. So now let's also think back to Heat. Those guys were packing heat, and then when they started blasting, they didn't care who got injured. Like the girl walking to school, they got shot through the head. Like they don't show that in the movie, but if you start blasting automatic weapons in the middle of the day, there's going to be a lot of so-called collateral damage. But do the people in on the heist care about that? Yes or no? Now, if you answered no, you would be correct. Now, also think about this. When you go into a heist as a criminal and you know that there's going to be a lot of firearms and bullets involved, are you not assuming that there's going to be collateral damage? And is that not part of your calculus? Have you come to, let's say, some type of moral ambivalence about that possibility? Now, in the best case scenario, they walk in everything goes according to plan. They don't even have to pull their guns, or if they pull them, they don't fire them, and then they walk out and everything's clean. The lower the collateral damage for them, the better. Especially if the blood doesn't, and guts and brains and stuff like that doesn't spray them in the face. But if they have to choose, they would have that happens far away, like 300 meters away. That stray bullet, they don't see any of that. They were just plugging away, right? And later, if they didn't see it, and they might have heard about it, but it's just printed in a newspaper, a couple of sentences, they didn't really experience it, did they? How do you think that's going to bother their conscience if they've included, let's say, a regime of champagne and soap parties afterwards to celebrate what they were able to carry off? So AstroTurf is important. You have one country, like for example Ireland, and their political operatives are speaking the same quack speak as is extremely unpopular in California, and they react the same, then you're dealing with a similar type of organism. It's a global outfit that is simulating Western values and their commitment to those values, when in fact it's commitment to a different type of values, which is the values of a heist participant. And I do encourage people to go to prisons and look at the people in there. They don't look too different than the political operators. The only thing they're missing are the fancy manicures and suits, but they're easily arranged if they are or have been designated to be the faces of a heist like that. So where they do fall down, though, is when they get a lot of public scrutiny. And that's why they're invested in information networks. And a lot of the information networks is not covering what they do. They just have sort of a North Korean flattery program for themselves and their heist operatives. Oh, and their opposition gets the opposite of that, especially when it's not true. But these are prisoner dilemma players that have chosen to be the criminal decision. So, and again, this is not a lot of people. It's really not. 100 people, 200 people, 1,000 people. If you can launder 150 billion a year doing that. And there are no bullets flying, at least not yet. At least not in their direction. If they can keep the whole thing, the whole illusion of representational government in play. There are very many things that could be said about the cult of Narcissus. But keep in mind that that's just the Hellenic version of it. The cult itself goes back to more obscure Mesopotamian origins. And if you want to take a less neutral approach, you could see it as some type of sick infatuation that certain women have for their children, and the process of having children, and their perhaps an over attachment to their children. in a way, having children is also rather mysterious, that you can produce a person, and then you involve God in that, and then this is the child of God, and this is a miracle, and then the child is a miracle maker. Everything the child does is a miracle. And you can just get wrapped up in that and then just think of the children that are born into that and surrounded by that. So that why shouldn't they believe that their primary caregiver and life bringer tells them that? So the power of stories are powerful. You tell one person that story, or you tell them a different story, and they'll have very different lives. How about just the story of neutrality versus that story? So in a lot of ways it's understandable. There is causality involved in everything. Now the materialists will just look at the causality of material things, but there's a spiritual causality, there's a subjective causality. And delusion has causality. I'm the best skydiver there is. I'm so good, I don't have to check my parachute before I jump. That's how I jump. I just throw it on my back and out I go. Every time I've done it, I've landed perfectly. Well, that's a delusional skydiver, isn't it? What are the odds that that's going to continue the way they think it's going to continue? Versus someone that doesn't have that delusion, that says, I know I'm very good, that I've done like halo jumps across mountain ranges and at night, and this is my 800th jump, but you know what, I'm going to check my own stuff again, just because I know that we live in an imperfect world. And the first imperfect thing is yourself. You could have thought you checked it, so it's best to check it twice or 3 times. Because you checked it, but you missed something the first time. But when you checked it the second time, the thing you missed the first time, you didn't miss it. If you check it a third time, then there's almost 100% certainty that it really is the way it should be. And to do that without thinking lesser of yourself, it's more of a pragmatic approach to human fallibility, which is a reality. Because we're limited creatures, we're not gods. We might have some godlike moments of insight, but we're not gods, we're humans, we're fallible, we're mortal beings. The woman who slapped you in the face, that's gonna probably cause some anger somewhere, unless you really are a god. But then when she went to slap you, she would have missed, or she wouldn't have been there in the first place. But lo and behold, here we have forms and apparitions and situations and misunderstandings and combinations of delusional viewpoints, and the result is something that leads to something else, and then we're all in that causality again. And then why did she have to get injured? And then why did you have to get injured? Because she got injured, because this is this circle of human folly that we can get involved in if and when it happens. Do you fault someone for getting angry, for getting slapped in the face? I don't. Because it wasn't me. I was just looking at the other guy get slapped in the face. And then I saw the reaction. It was automatic. He didn't think, okay, now it's time to get angry. The face just flushes red. The brain did it. The instincts did it. And yet the woman who slapped him in the face, it was her instincts too. She thought she was in the right. She thought that he had somehow insulted her when he just called her a name, which is like vibrations in the air. Your vocal cords, sort of like a frog. You ever hear frogs singing in the night? We do the same thing, and that forms a word, and that word can be heard by our ears, and that gets processed in the brain, and the image it produced in her brain was something that she felt at the moment wasn't a good thing. And so she reacted unskillfully. Here's a good piece of advice for hellish conditions, aka warlike conditions, cultural warlike conditions, is to listen to what people say, especially if they're hostile actors, hostile geopolitical actors. Really do pay attention to what they're saying so that you can read through the lines and also look at alliances. People that are doing big business with each other and it shows in the numbers, that proves what side they're on. Now, some people are on both sides of a conflict. Like, to a certain degree, Turkey is like this. They have no horse in a race between tribes that they don't like and don't like them. They really just like when all of their different people that are opposed to them get messed up. But the numbers don't lie. Well, of course they lie. I mean, that's a whole big part of the numbers game, is that there's a lot of lying going on. If you believe just accounting and you don't understand that there's such a thing as creative accounting, then you aren't paying attention. So as more abstract as economies get, the more abstract the accounting becomes, which makes it more important, but only in a system where irrelevancies are really important, because it's not important. The numbers, if they're not accurate, it's not important. This is the stock price of a global company. Well, global company, what does that mean? That all their production is in a hostile country, that they were too infatuated with money to realize, and so they've strategically screwed themselves and their investors. Well, that stinks to be them. I mean, weren't they tasked with the strategic outlook? Weren't they supposed to be the eggheads? But, eggheads can be wrong, especially if they were wrong from the get-go, or just information brokers paid for by outside entities. So here, this is the direction we want you to take. Present this as an inevitable positive outcome. That hostile country ABC is in the ascendancy and everyone else is in the descendancy. Like, they wanted to flip the script. They want to be the global determiners. They don't want to be determined to. They don't want to be limited in any of their activities, anywhere, for any reason. That type of personality. So when you understand that, and then you understand that such countries have militaries and that they're very well funded militaries, and then they have new branches of militaries that deal with messing up civilian populations that are, again, opposed to them in the logistical chain. Because if the trucks don't arrive, then the army doesn't work. So that the trucks don't arrive, it's probably good to spread some fentanyl in the places where they would be shipping from if they were there, but they're not there because the fentanyl got there instead, type of thing. If you think of it as long-term strategic operations, why wouldn't that be part of their strategic planning? But who would do such a thing? Well, horrible foreigners would do such a thing. They have no other option other than living for a dollar a day type people. So here, you can either stay here in a place like Somalia or Yemen or Syria, or you could get an apartment, but you're then part of our network operations, contingent, what have you, even if it doesn't have to be as obvious to other people as it is to us, because you get a little budget to wear clothes and walk around and act like a normal person and maybe get jobs in places we want you to get jobs, because that's better for us, not making the trucks arrive on time. Because above them are decision makers that don't make the right decisions based on the realities on the ground, such as initiating self-defense measures when one is being attacked, undermined, and from all different types of vectors, especially the civilian side of things, where you have innocent women and children, the elderly, the disabled, and whatnot, that are just being thrown wholesale to the dogs, while the preferred class gets all what they should have gotten instead, type thing. But in a warlike operation, isn't that the desired outcome, that your adversaries are diminished to the point of collapse? Was that not? I think I read that somewhere, that was the objective when you start hostile operations, which, by the way, they started. Like they're not only into their first, second, third strike, they're out on the civilian side. They're now starting on the other side of the world for now, because they figured that's what they wanted. They wanted that part, which they were going to take, but they wanted to take it, making sure that the people that would keep them from taking it wouldn't be adequately supplied. Not because it couldn't be done, but because the eggheads weren't there to see things not in their favor. Just explainers were there. Well, yes, let's do this. Oh, yeah, everyone wants us to say that we're going to do this. Okay, we'll say we're going to do this. Does it get done? No. Why doesn't it get done? Well, that person and then they start, that's their routine. Another way of looking at them, or at least this is one tactic they employ, is the play-alongism. So they figure out what would be, sometimes because of popular sentiment, what would be the right thing to do, and they sort of entertain that. But then they make sure that that doesn't happen. Like they plan in depth how they can make sure that that thing that would be the right thing, that they've come to the conclusion to would be the right thing, that doesn't happen. That they either take it on as a project that then gets torpedoed, or they just never get around to approving the things that would be necessary for that, but they are aware of that. They're savvy political operators, you see. They figured out, okay, this would lead to a strengthening. My modus operandi is weakening. So they have a team of people. Okay, how can we weaken this in the most demoralizing and diffuse and, however, in some way plausible way? And mismanagement is always a plausible explanation. We're the top leaders of the country, but we're blatant mismanagers on all different types of projects. And in fact, we don't even get our public relations right. We don't even get our communications right. Like, we don't inform ourselves of the issues we're supposed to be experts of, or create this loop of being an expert in a field that doesn't matter, like climate change. It's a place that doesn't matter, but they can be an expert in it, and they can talk about it at length to bore people, and nothing gets done. But they're in the position where they should be doing something else, entertaining some other opinions, but they're more focused on the most important thing, and that's this thing that is a sophisticated form of do-nothingism. Just imagine a captain, and to always abstract these titles, politician. It's a captain of a ship. He's got a crew. People are coming to him, they're giving him the navigation, they're saying, hey, we should be navigating. The navigator knows we need to get to this port. Tells the captain says, just keep on driving straight the whole time. How far do you think that captain is going to get? The ship just, that could be a great little short experimental film as well for you filmmakers out there. Just start doing it, because there are no institutions that are producing it right now, which is also understandable given the cultural warlike conditions that we live in and have been living in for some time. But with all this new camera gear out there, and also a lot of aftermarket stuff that's really great that a lot of people don't know how to use, but if you learn how to use it, you can make a great film. But it's the straight captain, you could call it. And it's a captain that once he gets going, he just continues straight. He doesn't turn, but he has to keep the crew pacified with explanations. So we're going to keep going straight here. Sir, don't you want to turn? Because we're going into and he goes through different dangerous things, where you would think the ship would sink, but miraculously it gets straight through the sharp rocks, half submerged rocks, right? And the crew is amazed that it was able, but it does take damage. So the ship takes damage and it just keeps going. And then at the end, at some point, it does run straight into ground, straight into the shore. And then they all fly out. Maybe the captain dies, and then they regroup as human beings on a new island, something like that. They have to give up the old ways, their old life, working under a captain that would not make the right decisions and kept them snowed the whole time, and it could have been disastrous, but in a way, and somehow it turned out not to be. It turned out to be better instead, that they can reflect how they do things, which is really empowering, because they decide to do the right thing and then they do the right thing type of thing, instead of just saying the right thing and being rebuffed in a strange social conditionality that is no longer real, at least once they get out of the conditionality that they're in, that they're able to just look at it from a distance and maybe come back into it, but maybe have a few more options now that they know that they might be in an absurd situation for an unforeseeable amount of time, but that isn't necessarily the end of the ride. It's just one iteration of life after the next. Coming back to the infomercialist for a second, some of them are psychosociological terrorists, straight up. They have to be. Otherwise, where would their weird takes and narratives come from. So they have these emotionalized points about history. Again, they feed off some type of historical narrative. And then they turn it into a distortion machine. And then they try to reframe what is moral and what's not in our current geopolitical context. But having you question fundamentally the culture where you came from or who you are, because that's sort of a way of creating sort of a anchorless type of person that is not grounded in reality or pragmatic, because they're talking about ideas, and this is emotionalism, and this is my frame, and these are the narratives. Look at this narrative. Now let's get back to the frame. And, we can learn from other people. We don't know everything. And then, we're vulnerable. We can't solve all these problems ourselves. So we got to make these associations with people that end up blackmailing us. Is that how the story ends? Because there's a certain supremacy in going to other people to find out solutions for your own people that you should have but don't. But maybe that's sort of the a priori problem, because why is that the case? Why isn't the culture propagating itself in a beneficial way? Well, it might just be all these psychosociological terrorists that have been able to dominate in classrooms around the countries you're in for decades now, that were not identified and were not removed, and in many cases aren't even in on the profit scheme. They're just the useful idiots. They're the people that were taught that way by people who were like what I just described. And then in the cultural scene, they keep them in positions of cultural esteem. They're the ones that are the real operators, whereas then they're just surrounded by the useful idiots that were primed to be useful idiots by the institutions that were either run by useful idiots, and I had a couple of these real operators mixed in amongst them, or they got it vicariously from their educated family members, or the people who read the right newspapers and the right magazines and watch the right TV shows, because they've been curated into a bubble of disinformation, cultural handicapping, and misdirection. So it's funny, like watch their formats, like the 40-minute format. If they're talking to a book author that's usually one of these ilk, then watch them work. These are psychologists that are working to manipulate in a political way, and you can see the political points, and then just look at it as a tactic, as a method, and as an operator. And you could fill in the little personal details about them. That would be interesting, but ultimately you don't need to do that. You can just see how they do it as infomercialists. And it's usually a tag team, two people. I really found this fascinating, and they have to say that in a convincing way, and so that they can reinforce some of these points. And again, because they're using the format itself, because they're a brand and an infomercialist outfit, they have more credibility as an expert. But if the truth be told, you could grab a dude that's walking into Kmart with a walker, like an old guy, and ask him a question, and he would have probably a better opinion than these people that have been they're not just distorted, they're the distorters of our time that have manifestly created bad conditions for us all and for the world. So it's really funny to watch them. This is like in the late stages of the Soviet Union. Their type of political operators had the same problem. It's called being discredited. So they can't run on the same fumes they can run on when they're with naive people that haven't been sabotaged as much as the West has in this day. And so they have a credibility problem, but they haven't changed their way of operating. They haven't changed jobs. They try to work on being more convincing. They try to seem to be more down to earth, more approachable, more vulnerable. But ultimately, it's just the best they can do. If you can see through it like I do, like they're not even, it's a pane of glass. There's nothing. I can see right through them. But for people who aren't accustomed to that method of operation, pseudo-intellectuals and young students stuck in college, and these are the professors, or this is the channel that your father used to watch, or you thought he used to watch, or your grandfather. This is the newspaper your grandfather used to read, but these people they're done. It's like people that will buy Timberlands, even though the manufacturing facility was like moved to some place, because they went with a production mindset instead of a quality mindset. They just bought the brand and decided to do it their way, not the right way, type people. So it's really sad and demeaning for them, but just think they didn't have any self-respect to begin with. These are just people that were able to pass the job interview of these companies. Just imagine that. These are the people that got through HR. These are the people that got through the barriers in the publishing houses, that got their book published and now get to live off royalties, although the book is a bomb. But it does get read because they got a network to distribute it on. It's like bad movies, right? There's probably a racket behind the bad movies too. Like there's some geniuses that figured out CGI or blue screen, and then they don't have to pay the actors. Here's the point. The point is that you can more or less, with more or less a surety, just consign them to the fifth column box. That there is a fifth column, this is what they do, this is what they did. And they're still amongst us. So, but they're not the only circus in town. In fact, I don't recommend at all interacting with them or getting into their matrix of engagement. Because, again, if you're engaging them in their frames, you're automatically going to lose. You're only ever going to be the boob in their circus. They're the management, they're the frame makers. It's not a fair contest, and they're not looking for new ideas, and they're not looking to be challenged in any way. And that's how they see things, from an extremely vulgar level. Like from somebody that knows they can't beat you at tennis, they don't want the tennis match to commence. They just want to try to berate you on everything other than tennis. Like you're a bad person, you know, you think bad, you walk bad, you look bad, you do bad, you are bad type thing, but in creative ways. That's what they understand under engagement. So, but they're not the only circus in town. So when you see them, you avoid them. That's it. They are not representative of your culture. They're the substitution for it. They're the filler. So imagine there's a real baseball game being played. You're not watching that. You're watching something from 30 years ago. But you could also reverse that. You could watch the one from 30 years ago if the baseball game of today isn't as good for socioeconomic and political reasons that have been politicized because people, the politicizers of politicization, decided to do it. So yeah, they're killjoys, they're humorless, they're wrong, they're inverters, they're mesmerizers, they're charlatans, they're sophists. So the less time you're involved, I mean, I would say even making fun of them is a form of engagement. In fact, all it does is make them more zealots. It just makes them more fanatical, because they're trying to prove that no, indeed, they're not the bad guys, you're the bad guys type thing. A vulgar person will latch onto that gives them energy, that energizes them. That's part of the polarization process. So no, I don't agree with engaging in them. In fact, making fun of them, I don't really see that either, but I do think the public should know who said what. I think that's one way of doing it without sensationalizing things. How about this? Not really editorializing things, but sort of, in a way, putting it together in such a way that people can see whether or not their representatives are representative of their values or not. I think that's a very democratic thing to do. It's not about making bombastic statements. See, again, their troll of populism is buffoonery. Like crazy statements, crazy outlandish acts. And they think that's popular. That might be populism. That's a dumb version of it. That should never either be a substitute for a political engagement with representatives that are serious about what they do. And they should be. They're the ones that are supposed to be taking care of all of the big problems. Would you tolerate that type of behavior, flagrant behavior from a captain of a ship, a bus driver, a train conductor, a orchestra conductor? Would you? No, fire that person, get another one. That's the process we're in. We're not dealing with personalities that are coming out of circles that nobody should have got to know in the first place. That type of thing. Get past these imposters and get to the real issues and connect with the people that are interested in solving them. That's how we move forward. Even if it's only incrementally, do that. You can do that. Now, there is one book that came out called Late Soviet Britain. I think that's something you might want to look into. I haven't read it, but it is at least an admission of the fifth column activity in the UK. And it's funny though, now that they've wrecked the government to the point that there's such a cliff between normal people's cultural values and their Leninistic, psychosociological, terroristic type of operating procedure, they don't have an opposition because nobody who is even remotely genuine or legitimate would have anything to do with that operation. In fact, it's a ruse. It's not like these people tolerate a countervailing opinion that discredits them by being the truth. They don't. They're hoping they can politicize you then into being a chump and that they can loosen up a little, the purse strings a little bit, maybe raise the salary. That's what they're looking into. Like, well, why don't you pay a little bit more and then we'll get better actors type thing. Because they're also underpaying their political stooges. So it's come to a point of a rupture. So where they're in just this like universe where they're self-reinforcing sound bites and it's all very it's all very inauthentic, and they have a credibility problem, which could lead to perhaps them just getting ousted wholesale, which probably would be the better thing than trying to come to some type of common ground with people that per definition don't allow a common ground and haven't, and so that's not going to change. And so what's the point of engaging again? See, they're just, they like to moonlight with engagement. Oh yeah, sure, engage, yeah, sure, come to the venue, you'll be invited. Yeah, right. Till you say one word they have some problem with, you get canceled. Oh, then you become the sacrifice. Then look, everyone, don't say what he said, otherwise this will happen to you. That's something they like to do, but they don't like to have real opposition. And of course, the bottom feeders that they have in there, their stooges, they're not going to deliver credibility. So what are they going to come up with next? That's sort of the position they're in. Will it keep going? I don't think so. If you don't maintain a car, it does break down. Although with them, the car is already broken down, but now they're worried about the credibility of the car, the brand. But you know what? That loss in credibility should be known. It is a consequence of bad behavior. Now, can it be reformed? I think it can, but it's going to need sweeping reforms, such as, again, I mentioned my plan. You could check back in the episodes. The message that the king should have long since heard is just shut them all down. And give it, again, 100, what was it, King's Holiday, yeah, that's right, 100 days, King's Holiday. Both of the damn houses get shut down. There's an internal review, and you just build back from nothing with a panel of people that know something about what they're doing. And there's going to probably be a process where you're going to still have to weed people out, because the people that these different toxic blobs are putting up there aren't the ones that should be in the positions in the first place. So we're talking about extensive damage to the cognitive facilities of a superpower, or at least could be one if it wasn't as deranged as it is. So this is it's not something that just happened. It's not a mistake. It's not just a cultural failing. This is is sabotage. That's what it is. So you got a hotel, again, it's filled with fleas and everything else. Nothing works. Plumbing's broke. Just demolish it and build something better. Something that works, is clean, is efficient, and well insulated. Has the new windows, the electricity doesn't set the place on fire, doesn't stink. It's well landscaped. Oh, and how this very affordable. No, none of these damn 30-year mortgages or whatever the hell. No, the price is really, really affordable for people doing great things. Yeah, I think everything's affordable for the people that are helping make that process happen. But it's not going to be luxurious. It's not going to be the bingo bango lambada dance that they've gotten off on for all these years. So that is coming to an end. But as far as living well, that's in the cards. 100-day holiday. Someone tell the king. And remember, he just needs to sign it. That's it. You can just put it down, he signs it, and then that's how something like that gets done. Let's also think about what their thinking was behind letting in all these people from all around the world. Is that these people are rich and entitled, and they don't care who does work for them. That type of mindset was prevalent in the stupidest and most decadent aristocracies. But even those wouldn't have gone to the lengths that globalists would go to, that, again, are just nominally somewhere with nominal allegiances, loyalties, you name it. Nominal cultural values and ethics. And they just want people to get things done with them. And if they can't pay a gardener below market wages, then they don't feel like their money really has value. What are they working for as an appointee in a manufacturing outfit that they've been bamboozled into? And so they didn't feel like they were getting the service that they deserve, in other words. And so that was the primary mover. Again, we're talking about the most vulgar people on the planet. That makes sense for them. It's just that, oops, the downstream side effects of that are horrifying in the extreme. They're exterminationists. Oops. Oh, but I only thought I was going to live 30 years longer, and now this is what we have. And There's side effects of all that stupidity that's cumulative. Oh no, what now? So you're going to bring in another government again, and then that's going to get discredited, and then what? They pull the feedback loop and start the censorship. That's sort of what they do in banana republics. So you didn't think it could happen in a big banana republic? This is the global plantation that you're on, whether you like it or not, because they're the owners and the managers per the law that they wrote or rewrote to suit them, type thing. But no, it's for everyone. It's trickle-down economics. That's sort of Thatcherism. They're still running around about Thatcherism and Hillary Clinton and all that. They're still butthurt about all that. They're still on board about all that. This is the detritus that such systems enable, that creates it. So, but just like with your computer, when you reboot, it doesn't really matter what software was playing on it. It doesn't matter at all. And you don't care about the old software that doesn't work. You're not getting yourself aggravated about the slowness of Netscape. You've got something else that works a lot faster and better and doesn't crash, and you don't care. It's the history. It's a curiosity that maybe some people know how annoying it was, but it really doesn't matter. You know, as a young kid looks up at you and goes, "What? Huh? Netscape? Who cares?" But when looking back, how aggravating was it? It was pretty aggravating, but that was the best they could do at the time. And so this is the best we can do at this time, which is not good at all. We have hellish, warlike conditions. It can happen, right? I just wanted my toast to put my toast in the toaster, and a fire broke out. I didn't want that to happen. This is our toaster fire of this year. So, is there a way forward? Yeah, you might have to throw this toaster out the window and buy a new one. Maybe it's repairable, but if it's that crispy and burnt, what's the point? The damn thing's a fire hazard. But you do have to be aware that if you are watching these people for technical reasons, is to make sure you don't get hoodwinked, because they are using highly manipulative processes. I mean, by just presenting themselves also in like a humble way, like messed up, like their hair's messed up and they look like they're just muddling through life. That's just, again, that's a disguise. These are war operators. Don't ever forget that. You don't come to these ideological conclusions unless you're 100% on board. 110%. So don't be beguiled. They make a very humble pitch sometimes. But then they'll come up with like an idea. Oh yeah, well let's get a digital ID off the ground so that they can follow you around. And then if you say anything that they don't like, your welfare benefits are canceled. That type of leverage over your life, that's what they like to have in Sovietized societies, like social credit point societies. Like in China, it's already there. Then they can just say, you say a bad word and it's registered to your digital ID, or your bank account takes a hit, something like that. That's the system they like to get going off the ground. Of course, it's all for humanitarian reasons. And the whole C-19 thing, that was sort of a prelude to that. Here's this condition, it's a flu, people are dying, but now you can go here and go there, but only if you have a digital ID that corresponds to a social credit score, something like that. That's sort of, then see, they come in real humble and talking about, how this is such a problem. But who would want to submit to an authority like that willingly? Well, you wouldn't want to do it willingly, but that's why they're looking for that sadistic type of external pressure that they can use as a lever for conformity. This is the Soviet style, so it's the late Soviet Britain. That's maybe a book you should look into. But see, it's all based on utopianism in the end. So they're committing all different types of fallacies. But if you just look at it as a self-enrichment program for the practitioners of it, then it makes sense. The people in on the bank heist, they're the ones that have a reason. They just need to give reasons for you to live like the people in Moldavia do. And this is one of the things most Paduginas don't know, is that in the Soviet Union they had no unemployment. Oh, China too as well. But Soviet Union, they had no unemployment because everyone was forced to work by law. Imagine that. And then you had the sociological terrorists that happened to also be corrupt. They made the decisions who went to university, who didn't, because on the basis of families. So it wasn't done by scientists, it was done by self-interested parties. So that's what you're looking at. If you see them come out with a system like that, that's what they're going to be pushing for. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. It was a total failure and a catastrophe. But it does create a 95-5 situation. So, I mean, maybe then their peasants, won't die off like 100% within 15 years. They'll just have, half. Maybe just 80% over 10 years or something like that. And it does help to think of it as a new form of slavery. A colorblind slavery, isn't that generous? That's what they pitch. But it has to be colorblind because only then do they have their own secure position. But it's inherently unstable. Like, for example, the Chinese and Russians, they don't do that in the despotic core. But see, the rulers of the international are going to be coming from there. That's sort of how their system is set up. So if they're pitching you that, that's sort of the late stage Soviet recommendation. Should you take it? That's a bad sales pitch in my opinion. But see, there's always young people. There's a sucker born every minute, isn't there? And think about it like this way. Why do they have to get rid of dissenters or dissidents? Because it discredits them. It removes the smoke show from the smoke show. It's a necessity of their system, is to kill the people that would otherwise be running their own native societies and cultures authentically. And so the only way they get the in is by creating this alienation, and then it just widens until the thing dies. So, and that's also the assumption of the despotic core that lives under these rules, is that they'll be more powerful than the exterior, and at some point they'll be able to sort everything out. But that's a gigantic assumption. That is that's like, well, this will all work if I can jump over this canyon that's 20 foot wide. Sure, might work. That's why, again, come back to the book. It's based on tropes, not just in the despotic core, but in the international outside the despotic core.